Hello and welcome to Dev Talks. This is Aadi. The ongoing conflict in Ukraine has drawn in the eyes of the world. To discuss a perspective from Russia, I have with me Mr. Andrey Kortunov, who's the Director General of the Russian International Affairs Council. Sir, thank you so much for joining me for this discussion, and it'll be interesting to know more about the situation on the ground as well as in diplomatic and political circles from someone who's closer to the battle zone than I am.
You're welcome.
So to begin with, the ground operations is now as termed as pretty much everyone, in the phase 2 or the phase B of the operations. When we look at it right now, what do you think are the main objectives which are set out for this operation, sir?
Well, I guess that the goal of the Russian operation at this stage is to get to the old administrative borders of the Lugansk and Donetsk regions of Ukraine to make sure that all these regions are firmly under the Russian control. There are some activities in other parts of Ukraine, especially in the south, but these activities are clearly secondary to the major offensive that we now observe in Donbass proper.
Interesting, sir. And, a lot of people actually have been expecting a huge Russian, forward movement from the east. And what we see on the ground are, a very slow tactical level movement which is taking place on the eastern side and minor corrections which are taking place on the southern side. So do you think, in your opinion, everything is going as per what has been set out by the political leadership?
Well, we don't know what the initial plans were, so it is difficult for us to judge whether these plans are successfully implemented or not. But what is clear is that the Russian leadership decided that it should limit the forces engaged in this operation. Many in Moscow were concerned that President Putin would probably announce general mobilization on the V-Day. 2 days ago, he made a speech at the Russian military parade, and many thought that probably he would announce some changes in the operation that would basically include more troops dispatched to Ukraine and a more energetic strategy to break the Ukrainian resistance. However, nothing like that happened, and so far there have been no major changes in the way in which the Kremlin approaches the conflict. There is some gradual, I think, quite slow advances, but definitely Mariupol is now under the Russian control. And I think that if they really want to get to the old administrative borders, probably they will get to them within the next 2 or 3 weeks.
All right, sir. So let's talk about the sanctions for some time. The sanctions are so innumerable. Somebody was putting out a count; it runs into thousands. What is the effect that these sanctions are having on the ground with regards to the people and, of course, the support the people would give for the military operations in Ukraine, sir?
I think that so far sanctions have an impact on the Russian urban middle class. These are people who go to Western fast food chains. These are people who go shopping to Western boutiques, and of course, for them, it is serious. Also, many of these people have been working for various Western companies. So, since these companies are now leaving the country, I think there is an issue of employment and jobs. But so far, the sanctions have not reached the core of the Russian population, especially if we're talking about people who live in small towns, rural areas, away from Moscow, from St. Petersburg. These people do not operate in foreign currencies. They do not have bank accounts abroad, no property abroad. So for them, sanctions are not that significant. My personal take is that sooner or later that sanctions will start influencing their living standards as well, but it will come with a delay, maybe a couple of months, maybe even next year. But definitely there is a lot of inertia in the Russian economic system. And also we should not underestimate the professionalism of those who are in charge of keeping the macroeconomic and macro-financial stability in the country. If you look at the exchange rate, you'll see that ruble is not plummeting. On the contrary, dollar is losing value. And it seems that in terms of maintaining the macroeconomic stability, the Russian government so far has done a great job. We don't see any major changes. But again, let me emphasize that if this military operation continues, if there are new sanctions, definitely more and more Russians will start feeling the pain.
Zed, what about the support that people have for the operations in Ukraine? Recently we read a survey that was put out by one of these agencies in Europe, which talked about 80 to 90% of the people supporting the operations within Russia. Would you agree with something like that?
Well, there is a natural phenomenon in Russia running around the flag. I think it's typical for any country in such a situation. The public tends to rally around the leader, and indeed the approval ratings of Mr. Putin go up, not down, at this particular juncture. Of course, one of the questions is to what extent we can try opinion polls, because whether people say what they really think or not remains a question. But we have to keep in mind that the political opposition in Russia is fragmented, and many opposition leaders had to leave the country. So it is not easy to organize protests. But again, my personal thinking is that the current level of support is hardly sustainable. That as things continue to unfold, it will be more and more difficult to maintain the support of the public, unless there are some significant victories on the battlefield, which is of course an open question for the time being.
Absolutely, sir. Let's talk about the negotiations. So we saw in the early parts of this operation that the negotiations literally picked up quite a decent speed. And the world was expecting some amount of a breakthrough or something like that happening between Russia and Ukraine. We see the Ukrainian government has pretty much changed its entire stand today with regards to the negotiations, and there have been some changes from the Russian side as well. But the talks themselves have kind of broken down. How do you see the outlook of the Ukrainians towards this conflict? At the end of it, it's their land which is in question today.
Well, indeed, I think you're right. There are changes in approaches to negotiations, and apparently both sides believe that with time they can get stronger negotiating positions. So neither Russians nor Ukrainians seem to be in a hurry to go on with the negotiating process. Of course, there are contacts. They keep these channels of communication open, mostly in the online format. But I see that the positions of the two sides are not really convergent, but rather divergent. For instance, if you look at the Ukrainian position, the most recent statements from the Ukrainian foreign ministry suggest that the war or this conflict might end only after Russia vacates all the territory of Ukraine, including Donbass and Crimea. Clearly, this is not acceptable to the Kremlin. And the Kremlin, in its own term, now expresses some ambitions regarding to territories beyond Donbass. For instance, now Russia is in control of the Ukrainian region of Kherson, And I don't think that there is any inclination on the part of the Russian armed forces to move out of the Kherson area. So there are many uncertainties, and I think that unfortunately both sides are not considering a compromise. Apparently, Ukrainians believe that with time they will get more and more assistance from the West that would allow them to start a counteroffensive. Russians, again, apparently believe that they should complete at least this stage of the military operation before they can restart some substantive negotiations. I hope that the positions of the two sides will change, that they will start moving towards a compromise. But right now, we have no reasons to be too optimistic about a peace agreement or even a ceasefire agreement to be signed in the immediate future.
Absolutely. And we see, a whole lot of rhetoric flying around from both the sides with regards the battlefield right now. And that doesn't really help the situation of negotiation sort of a point of view. Absolutely, sir. So, a lot of people and Russia watchers actually say that Russia has been preparing itself economically for such kind of sanctions if it had to take a step like this into Ukraine, because it probably read the situation which after what developed after the Crimea incident in 2014. How do you see the preparations being done by, as you also mentioned, by the people in charge of the economy and the system within Russia to prepare itself, the country, the people, and the system itself for such kind of sanctions, especially looking at the oil markets, sir?
I think that many of us, and I include myself into this group, did not expect this operation to start because we were sure that the repercussions of this military operation would be very, very serious. And in this sense, we were right. We were wrong because we thought that the operation wouldn't start, but we were right in our predictions of the consequences of the military operation. Indeed, right now, Russia has to make very serious readjustments. And in terms of its energy export, it has to move away from its traditional consumers in Europe to new markets. And of course, the most lucrative opportunities are in Asia. It's East Asia, places like China, Southeast Asia, ASEAN countries, South Asia, India. And I think one of the key questions here is to what extent that these new markets are ready or are willing to absorb the Russian energy export. Because, of course, any country and any company which has an intention to buy Russian oil and gas has to consider extraterritorial sanctions from the United States. So it's not an easy decision for any of Russia's partners. We will see how it works out, but definitely there'll be some major losses along the way. Even to readjust the export, you have to invest a lot into transportation, into logistics. Changing geography is not an easy thing to do, especially if we are talking about large quantities of oil and gas.
Exactly. And this whole thing is actually becoming the backbone of the war and the actions being taken by both the sides. And that's something which we can see across the world. Let's talk about the information warfare, sir. In the West, the perception of Russia being a giant in terms of propaganda, in terms of, the online world and the influence market and stuff like that. For us as observers, we realize that, the kind of information warfare that has been put across from the Western side has been overpowering in terms of the information of the battlefield. How do you think Russia looks at it? And is there some way to put out the Russian message across to the world?
Well, I think that we should recognize that Ukraine is winning the information war. that the message from Kiev is much more convincing and it is stronger in many audiences than any messages coming from Moscow. Moreover, I'm personally concerned that this current criticism of the Russian actions goes beyond the Russian leadership and beyond the political class. We clearly see many manifestations of Russophobia in Europe and in North America. There is this what they call cancel culture manifestations. When we see that people are in the private sector, in civil society, Russian students and Russian scholars become targets of discrimination and sometimes are not treated fairly. So this is a problem because definitely the concept of collective responsibility is something which is not organic to the liberal political system. So it's one thing to condemn actions by the Russian government. It's another thing to cancel the Russian society and the Russian culture and the Russian science and the Russian civil society. So I think that here we have a problem, and this problem is likely to be with us for some time. And of course, a lot depends on Russian intellectuals or Russian opinion makers, on those who can deliver the message to the rest of the world.
Interesting. So as a matter of fact, we also now in the past 10 days see a different perspective of the ongoing battle on the ground, and certain reports have started trickling in. So I think there is something happening in terms of putting out the Russian side of the story. I'm not saying the right or the wrong message, but one should be able to get both the sides of the story to analyze and make their own judgments. My last question to you, sir, how does Russia look at India's stand on the conflict in Ukraine, sir?
I think that clearly Russia counts on India because we have a long-term, very friendly relations with Indians. And moreover, I think that in certain ways we can talk about certain symmetries. India has problems with Pakistan, which is a country which is culturally, historically close to India, but has many disputes with India. Russia has about the same situation with Ukraine. So I think that there are expectations that in India they understand the problems that Russia has to confront. At the same time, I think that there is understanding that the Indian support has to be limited. India has good relations with Ukraine as well. India has a strong partnership with the United States and a number of other Western countries. So India has to take a detached position. Some in Russia believe that India could play a more active role in mediating the conflict. Maybe together with other countries, India might become an honest broker in trying to resolve the problem. However, of course, as we discussed earlier, in order to mediate successfully, you need, first of all, to have political will on both sides of the conflict to come to a compromise, and then probably third-party mediation could become efficient and appropriate. We are not yet at this point, unfortunately, but I hope that this point will come before too long.
Absolutely, sir. And let's hope it as fast as possible than the later, because at the end of it, war does not do any good to anyone. Of course, objectives and entire thing is completely different, but on the ground, the situation can be understood by all of us, and especially in India, because we faced 4 or 5 wars in our short independent history. Thank you, sir, for that very realistic perspective from Russia and a very, very different outlook than what we normally hear in the media and normally read in the opinion pieces emanating. And it will be great to catch up with you once we do come to a point of time where both the parties are in some sort of a position to agree to a negotiation, to get a fresh perspective from you as to what the future holds for that particular region. Thank you once again, sir. Till next time.
Thanks for inviting me. Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.